But we gotta talk about global macroeconomics. We gotta talk about Bitcoin and what it is providing for countries that have been sanctioned, for the individuals in those countries, how this is going to impact, basically the West's viewpoint on cryptocurrency. It may end, that meme that's like, oh, we're the bad guys, aren't we? I think when it comes to cryptocurrency, it could be that we shift into a position where we are the bad guys, right? And this could be due to regulation. This could be due to the forcing of sanctions that greatly hinder blockchain and centralize it. This could come down to essentially a very odd position where, because of sanctions on, countries like Russia from the US and other Western countries and everything that's going on with NATO, you could end up in a position where cryptocurrency is demonized from that perspective and basically regulated to all heck, or even potentially completely made illegal. Now, with the amount of infrastructure that's been put into Bitcoin here recently within the United States, I wouldn't think that would immediately go that path, but definitely within the UK, it could start going there quite a bit quicker, especially with this tying into essentially energy support and Bitcoin, right? So what we have here, man, this is so wild. Russia will provide electricity to Kazakhstan for Bitcoin mining. This is just absolutely wild. In Russia, the government has begun preparations to provide electricity to Kazakhstan for cryptocurrency mining. Local newspaper RBC reports that the governments of the two countries have agreed to amend the existing agreement on measures to ensure parallel operation of two energy systems. Specifically, it reports that the Russian government has ordered appropriate amendments to this agreement to enable the supply of electricity to crypto miners. Kazakhstan is significantly smaller than Russia, yet according to the latest available data, more than 3 times the Bitcoin hash rate of its huge neighbor would be located there. Moreover, interestingly, in recent days, Bitcoin mining hash rate has hit a new all-time high globally, exceeding 270 exahash a second for the first time in history. The record dates back to yesterday, while today the hash rate is reported to be down below 260 exahash a second. Of these, more than 13% globally belong to miners operating in Kazakhstan. As a matter of fact, when China banned mining last year, completely zeroing its hash rate, many Chinese miners moved to the neighboring Kazakhstan. The country is rich in fossil hydrocarbons, so electricity generation has very low costs. For this reason, miners fleeing China have found fertile ground. Added to this is a degree of benevolence on the part of the country's authorities towards Bitcoin miners, which also explains why they have not actually opposed the increase in electricity consumption due to this mass displacement. Now, that is not completely true. Remember, they had additional tax that they added onto it. I believe it went up by like 5%. Let me know, or not 5%. I believe it went up to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Unless I'm mixing something up, I'll have to go look at that again. And I thought that they were specifically taxing and you had to get a license in Kazakhstan. I don't think they were completely friendly, recall, because they were having rolling blackouts due to the high demand. So, to be fair, Russia has also seen its hash rate grow over the past few years, but it has shrunk globally from about 5% to 4% within 3 years. However, this data is going back to January, which is before the war in Ukraine began and international sanctions were triggered. Curiously, as of September 2021, China's hash rate is back to being the second largest in the world at more than 20%. Of course, that is probably primarily due to the fact that none of it ever moved in the first place, and there were definitely things like VPNs being utilized in the underground for China, and then they just gave up completely on even hiding their IPs and so on. Where was that getting sent through? Maybe through the US, maybe through Kazakhstan partially, maybe through Iran, I believe was one that had a steep increase in hash rate. The problem, of course, with tracking all of this is that you can only really track the IPs of essentially primarily where the actual mining pools are located, and depending on how that functions too, you could get down to the miner, but if they're running a VPN, like, it really depends on essentially who is doing the research, but no matter what, whether you read the pool or whether you read the actual miners that are connecting to the pool, either way, you're going to have a hard time actually determining the origination of the hash rate without a significant amount of due diligence that I don't think is really something that is worth it at the end of the day to figure out where it's coming from. But we do know that a lot of hash rate did move to Kazakhstan, primarily because we know that they had rolling blackouts and issues with actually providing the power, right? So, and we do know that China was the largest by a huge margin. So having them back over 20% is not surprising, right? That would mean that about 30% of the hash rate in China prior to the ban remained in China, with, essentially the remaining 60% of that moving to other locations, primarily the US, of course. And then following that up would be like Iran and Kazakhstan, etc. So, it is possible that the increase in global hash rate triggered since mid-August with the price of Bitcoin following may also be due in part to these dynamics, in addition to those related to the significant increase in machine efficiency. The latter in particular allows for greater hash rates with the same amount of electricity consumed or even less. Miners have every interest in increasing their hash rate because mining is a competition in which those with higher hash rates win more. But they also have an interest in not increasing costs or even reducing them. While China and Russia have long had a contentious relationship with cryptocurrencies, it seems that mining is not frowned upon at all in Kazakhstan. Still, once again, I'm not so sure this is true. And this is one of those things. I always say this, and I'm going to say it again, don't confuse me with facts. I'm trying to think here. If I think back, I'm pretty sure Kazakhstan did have some issues with mining, right? So making a blatant statement, in cryptonomist or whatever, that Kazakhstan didn't frown upon it is, I'm pretty sure, verifiably false. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and verify this because this is actually going to bug me a lot if they're just stating this. And so I believe Kazakhstan rolling blackouts was this summer, right? Or earlier this year. Crypto mining. Yeah. Yeah, there was literally, Kazakhstan you have to get a permit, and then they were shutting down illegal miners because they were having rolling blackouts. So this article is incorrect, or all the reports about them doing rolling blackouts is incorrect. I'm not really sure. Kind of odd. So it says, however, the significant increase in energy consumption due to mining could cause shortages in the availability of electricity for other users. Okay, so maybe they do cover it here. This is probably why the country has asked for help from its huge neighbors so as to obtain any missing electricity. So they're saying, okay, I think I understand what they're trying to say here. They're trying to say essentially that it's the power limits are what's preventing it, not necessarily that the government's against the mining, right? So what they're going to do now is reach out to Russia, etc., and say, hey, can you provide some power here? And, of course, like we were talking about before, this is interesting. I do think within Russia, they'll have an excess amount of energy to sell off. There appears to be something that went down with a pipeline, that potentially was going to help supply energy for the winter months to European countries, but that will no longer be needed. That electricity could be exported for, additional revenue to other countries. Exporting to a country like Kazakhstan, where you have basically more Bitcoin miners than you have power to facilitate for them, would kind of make sense to actually monetize it. This is interesting, right? So RBC in particular reports that InterRo, i.e. Russia's sole electricity import-export operator, with the appropriate changes to the agreements between the two countries, will be able to sell electricity to Kazakhstan by entering into special contracts directly with Kazakhstan's crypto mining companies. Problems of electricity availability shortages due to crypto mining occurred in Kazakhstan in January this year, when the government was forced to shut down 200 mining companies for a period of time. Despite this, mining has not been banned, and the agreement to purchase additional electricity from Russia clearly demonstrates a desire on the part of Kazakh government to allow or to let this type of activity continue, as long as it does not create problems with the availability of electricity to citizens and other businesses. RBC also reports that Kazakhstan is actively developing the crypto sector, so much so that by the end of the year, a crypto card would be issued to be used for common payments in stores. In addition, a bill was submitted last week to regulate crypto mining in the country, although it has not yet been approved. It is abundantly clear not only that Kazakhstan wants to continue to allow such activities to take place within its borders, but also wants to encourage their development in a way that is economically and socially sustainable. Such attitudes towards crypto mining in Russia, for example, is absent, although steps have been taken towards practical use of cryptocurrencies. In Kazakhstan in particular, it appears that the government sees crypto mining as an attractive activity because of its wealth it produces, and would like to encourage that this wealth produced in Kazakhstan be spent within the country's borders. It is not the only country that considers the wealth produced by locally by crypto mining to be attractive, except not my town in Texas, because apparently they were like, screw you, up your power rates. Just as it is also not the only one that has problems with power shortages due to a high consumption of this activity. However, it is one of the few that has decided to take matters into its own hands and look for solutions that are not like the Chinese solution of banning it. Besides, the ban in China is only notional, as after an initial moment when all the miners seemed to have complied and resigned, it only took a very few months for the resignation to vanish like snow in the sun. The Chinese case is emblematic because the Chinese government is still an authoritarian regime, usually able to impose its decisions on its citizens, whereas with regard to crypto mining, it was only able to unleash a passing terror that simply vanished within a few months. And that is very interesting. That is a kind of one of those things that if you're into crypto and you want to talk about individual sovereignty, financial freedom, etc., you can point to an authoritarian regime that basically was unable or incapable to actually regulate the mining of Bitcoin and say, look here, this is what it does, right? This is what it's here for. It is doing its job. Is it doing it as fast as people want it to? Not necessarily, but it does appear to be doing it faster than anything else could really necessarily do what it's doing, in my humble opinion, especially if we look at crypto as a whole, the stablecoin situations in things like Argentina, etc. Crypto is enabling individuals to basically find some sort of financial freedom and autonomy that previously was unavailable to them, right? That's what we are finding with crypto now as it moves further and further along. So the situation is now not back to the way it was before, but apparently in some parts of China, the authorities are turning a blind eye to mining, probably because they are interested in some way in the profits it produces. After all, the relationship between authorities and cryptocurrencies in Russia also follows a similar trend. In fact, as time goes on, they are increasingly tolerated, if not exploited, to try to circumvent international sanctions. From this point of view, Kazakhstan has simply shown more realism and more long-term vision, although it has not actually solved the problem of high energy consumption yet, since the agreement made with Russia's InterRo, or RAO, has only partly shifted into the neighboring country. Now, I think this does spell out problems for essentially innovation within the Western countries. I think economic success within Western countries too. I do believe in cryptocurrency as the future in general. And so when I look at it and the amount of wealth that it can produce for countries, if you were to look at this from, a potentially outdated perspective. So I think in the near future, essentially the point of cryptocurrency is also to break down the need for borders when it comes to digital payments. Obviously, like some of the big proponents of CBDCs are to basically enable cross-border payments more easily. That's what's being pushed as far as positives for FedNow, for example. In the United States, it's positive. That's what they basically for digital currencies in general. They want to have easier cross-border payments, but that's already being done by cryptocurrency without the need of a nation state run crypto. At the end of the day, I think like breaking down borders financially is obviously going to happen, but in the current status of the way the world functions, where we have basically these arbitrary borders drawn around portions of land to determine, who lives where and who pays who, their taxes, etc. It's interesting to think about the competition that is laid out there, right? Russia versus the US versus China versus Saudi versus the UK, or even you could break it down even like larger, you could say imperialism versus communism versus capitalism. However you really want to look at it, we still have these like our teams or whatever. And our teams, right, are going to fall behind if they do not participate and take advantage of cryptocurrency, which is then why we go into the essentially into the theory of the Trojan horse, right? Which is like Bitcoin is the Trojan horse to the nation state and to banks, because it is so attractive and elusive that they will let it in because they want to make money off of it. But once it's let in, it will completely basically dissolve the nation state and banks, because essentially what you end up doing is giving all the citizens financial autonomy and freedom. And this is a very real path that we could take. It does, in my humble opinion, mean that you have to avoid central bank digital currencies at all costs. But this is essentially the path that is set in front of us, and we can see it start to happen here, right? Basically, authoritarian regimes that are unable to push it out. Why? Because the people that they put in authority to go shut down these mining farms, etc., are getting paid off by the mining farms, so that the actual financial incentive doesn't align for them to be able to force people to do anything. It's absolutely brilliant and fascinating to consider. What we're going to see with it here in the short term, though, is potentially it being used or leveraged in global conflict, which is a little bit more scary, right? So right now, what you have is a situation where the positives and the positives, the incentives that were previously not aligned in Russia to accept cryptocurrency as a viable solution due to sanctions from the Western world, has now made basically Bitcoin more, or Russia basically more incentivized to participate within Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So now their government starts to participate, even to the point to where now they're also going to be monetizing excess energy that they have due to, of course, the reduction of the energy being pushed over to other places to basically power crypto mining farms. All of this is, look, this is going to be a time in history that is analyzed, and hindsight, we're going to be like, and we see it. Right now, it's a little murky, but it's absolutely fascinating. I don't know. I'm fascinated by it. Hopefully I track it and share that fascination with you guys, because Like, this is crazy. Like, never would I have thought that, like, essentially what you would have would be some sort of global conflict that basically was all over essentially cryptocurrency and people's use of cryptocurrency, breaking down basically communist states to actually participate within that cryptocurrency. It's just weird. It's just absolutely weird. It'll be interesting to see, you know, what happens here in the near future, though, and we'll keep track of it. Hope you guys will stay tuned. I don't know. I can't predict it, obviously. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. You can check out the full episode here or more crypto content down here. Also, I'd like you to check out my locals page at sonofatech.locals.com, where you can become a member for free or choose to be a $5 a month supporter that unlocks additional content.